I'm Liora Voss, married to a millionaire CEO, living a lavish life in Atlanta that hid dark secrets. I nearly destroyed my marriage with Harlan Cade for an ex who manipulated me, until my intuition uncovered a shocking conspiracy. Betrayals, poison, and a devastating secret that changed everything. This story of love, revenge, and redemption will grip you to the end. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you don't miss a video, and leave a comment with "at the end." I want to know what you think. Ready to dive into this journey together? I'm Liora Voss, living in a jaw-dropping mansion in Atlanta, married to a millionaire CEO who seems to care more about his company than me. I was ready to walk away with half his fortune, until one moment flipped my world upside down. RT. To know the secret that changed everything? Don't click away, because this story will shock you. I never thought my life would turn into a high-stakes drama straight out of a movie. But here I am, Liora Voss, standing in the middle of a glittering mess. At 32, I'm the wife of Harlan Cade, the CEO of Cade Pharmaceuticals, one of the biggest players in Atlanta's cutthroat pharmaceutical industry. Our mansion in Buckhead, with its marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlanta skyline, screams wealth. But behind the chandeliers and designer dresses, my marriage is a sham. It was arranged 3 years ago to seal a merger between my family's company, Voss Biotech, and Harlan's empire. My father, long gone, left me with a legacy to protect, and marrying Harlan was the price. Love? That wasn't part of the deal. Harlan is everything you'd expect from a CEO. Sharp suits, sharper eyes, and a demeanor so cold it could freeze the Georgia summer. He's always in meetings, jetting off to New York or London, or locked in his office in downtown Atlanta, strategizing ways to dominate the market with new cancer drugs. I barely see him, and when I do, it's like talking to a brick wall. "We'll discuss this later, Liora," he says, his voice clipped, before disappearing again. I used to wonder why he agreed to this marriage. Now, I don't care. Or at least, that's what I told myself. My heart was somewhere else, tangled up with Theo Langford, my childhood sweetheart. Theo and I grew up together in Savannah, sneaking kisses by the river and dreaming of a life bigger than our small town. He's back in my life now, all charm and ambition, with plans to launch a startup that could rival Cade Pharmaceuticals. His pitch? A groundbreaking immunotherapy drug that could change cancer treatment forever. But he needs funding, big funding. And that's where I come in. My plan was simple: divorce Harlan, demand half his shares in Cade Pharmaceuticals, plus $1 billion settlement, and hand it all to Theo to build his empire. "You deserve a real life, Liora," Theo whispered last week over coffee at a sleek cafe in Midtown, his hazel eyes locked on mine, stirring memories of simpler days. "Harlan's holding you back." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? Theo knew me before all this, before the private jets, the boardroom politics, the weight of being a Voss in a world that watches your every move. My half-sister, Rowan Keene, was all in on the plan too. Rowan, with her perfectly styled blonde hair and venomous smile, has lived off our family's wealth her whole life, flitting between our Buckhead mansion and her influencer parties. She's never liked Harlan. "He's a robot, Liora," she said, rolling her eyes as we sipped wine on the terrace. "You're wasting your best years. Theo's your soulmate." Her words fueled my resolve. I met with my lawyer, drafting divorce papers that would shake Atlanta's elite. Half the company, $1 billion and freedom. It felt like justice. But something didn't sit right. Call it intuition, a nagging voice in the back of my mind that wouldn't shut up. It started small, like a whisper when I signed the preliminary documents. "Are you sure about this?" I brushed it off, but it grew louder every time I saw Harlan. Like last night, when he came home late, his tie loosened, exhaustion etched into his face. He paused at the dining room table, where I was reviewing the divorce terms. "You're up late," he said, his voice softer than usual. For a second, I thought I saw something, concern maybe, in his dark eyes. But then he turned away, and I told myself it was nothing. Still, my intuition kept buzzing, like a warning, signal I couldn't ignore. That intuition hit harder when I met Theo again, this time at a rooftop bar overlooking Peachtree Street. He was all smiles, laying out his vision for the startup. "With your help, Liora, we'll crush Cade Pharmaceuticals," he said, his hand brushing mine. But something felt off. His words were too smooth, his promises too big. My intuition screamed, "He's using you." I pushed the thought away, but it lingered, gnawing at me. Why was Theo so obsessed with Harlan's company? And why did Rowan keep pushing me toward him, like she had her own agenda? Then there was the gala invitation. Cade Pharmaceuticals was hosting a charity event at the Atlanta History Center, a glittering night of power players and big checks. Harlan insisted I attend, saying, "It's important for the company." I rolled my eyes but agreed, slipping into a sapphire gown that cost more than most people's rent. As I stood in front of the mirror, my intuition flared again, like a storm brewing. Something was going to happen at that gala, something that would change everything. I didn't know what, but I could feel it in my bones. Was it about Harlan? Theo? Or something bigger, hiding in the shadows of Atlanta's elite? I stepped into the gala that night, my heels clicking on the marble floor, unaware that I was walking into a trap. Someone was watching me, someone who knew my plans, and they were ready to make their move. What happened next would make me question everything I thought I knew about my husband, my family, and myself. But that's a story for another moment. Stick around because you won't believe what I found out. I was one step away from throwing my marriage to a millionaire CEO into the trash, ready to betray Harlan Cade with my ex. But one night, at a gala dripping with secrets in Atlanta, someone spiked my drink, and what happened next made me question everything. Want to know who set me up? Stick around, because this revelation will blow your mind. I, Liora Voss, walked into the Cade Pharmaceuticals gala at the Atlanta History Center with my heart pounding. The place was a sea of sparkling chandeliers, clinking champagne glasses, and Atlanta's elite strutting in tailored suits and designer gowns. My sapphire dress hugged my curves, and I felt every eye on me as I moved through the crowd, arm in arm with Harlan Cade. He looked like he stepped out of a magazine, his black suit screaming power, but his face was the same old mask. Cool, detached, like I was just another prop in his CEO world. My mind wasn't on him, though. It was on Theo Langford, my childhood sweetheart, and the divorce papers I'd been secretly drafting. Half of Cade Pharmaceuticals and $1 billion. That was my ticket out, straight to Theo's dream of crushing Harlan's empire with his startup. But my intuition, that nagging voice in my head, wouldn't let me relax. It had been whispering warnings all week, ever since I signed the preliminary divorce terms. Something's not right, it said, like a storm brewing in my gut. I ignored it, focusing on the gala's glitz, the marble floors, the string quartet, the whispers of Atlanta's power players. Theo was there too, across the room, flashing that charming smile that used to make my knees weak back in Savannah. He caught my eye, raising his glass, and I felt a pull, like I was 16 again. Rowan Keene, my half-sister, was by his side, her blonde hair gleaming under the lights. She'd been pushing me toward Theo for weeks, saying, "Harlan's a cold fish, Liora. Theo's your real shot at happiness." I wanted to believe her, but my intuition kept buzzing, louder now, like it knew something I didn't. I grabbed a champagne flute from a passing waiter, hoping to calm my nerves. The bubbles hit my tongue, but something tasted off. Bitter, almost. Metallic. I brushed it aside, chalking it up to stress. Then the room started to spin. My vision blurred, and my legs wobbled like I was on a sinking ship. Liora, you okay? Harlan's voice cut through the haze, his hand gripping my arm. I tried to answer, but my words slurred, and the last thing I saw was Rowan's face across the crowd, smiling like she'd just won a prize. Then, darkness. When I woke up, I was in our penthouse apartment in Midtown, sprawled on our king-sized bed with its 1,000 thread count sheets. Harlan was sitting beside me, his tie undone, his dark eyes locked on me with a look I'd never seen before. Panic. Maybe even fear. "You're safe now," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard. "I carried you out of there." My head throbbed, and my mouth felt like cotton, but one thought screamed through the fog. Someone drugged me. My intuition was on fire, now telling me this wasn't an accident. "Who would do this?" I mumbled, my voice hoarse. Harlan's jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. Instead, he handed me a glass of water and said, "We'll figure it out, together." For the first time, I wondered if I'd misjudged him. The next morning, I sat at our glass dining table, staring at the Atlanta skyline as the sun rose over Peachtree Street. My body ached, but my mind was racing. I replayed the gala in my head. Rowan's smirk, Theo's intense stare, the bitter champagne. My intuition was screaming, "You're being played." I started digging, checking my phone for messages. There was one from Theo, sent hours after the gala. "Hope you're okay, Liora. We need to talk." Something about his tone felt wrong, too calculated. Then I remembered Rowan's words from days ago, when we were sipping wine on the mansion's terrace. "Harlan's hiding something. You need to get out before he drags you down." Was she covering for someone, or herself? I confronted Harlan in his home office, a sleek room with mahogany shelves and a view of the city. "What happened last night?" I demanded, my hands shaking. He leaned back in his chair, looking more tired than I'd ever seen him. "I don't know yet," he said, "but I'm having security pull the gala footage." His voice was calm, but his eyes betrayed something deeper. Concern, maybe even guilt. My intuition latched onto that. "He's not telling you everything," it whispered. I pressed him. "Why did you stay with me all night? You barely talk to me most days." He froze, then looked away. "You're my wife, Liora," he said, almost too quietly. "I had to make sure you were okay." His words hit me like a punch. Was this the same Harlan who barely glanced at me during dinner? I started piecing things together. Someone at that gala wanted me out of the way. Maybe to stop my divorce plans, maybe to hurt Harlan. My intuition pointed at Rowan. She'd been too quick to push me toward Theo, too eager to trash Harlan. I remembered a conversation from weeks ago when she hinted at knowing secrets about Cade Pharmaceuticals. "They're not as clean as they seem," she'd said, smirking. Was she involved in something bigger? And Theo, his startup dreams, were riding on my money, but how far would he go to get it? I decided to test them both. I texted Theo, pretending I was still on board with the divorce. "Meet me tomorrow," I wrote. "We'll talk about the patent." If he was behind the drugging, I'd find out. As for Rowan, I'd watch her every move. But my intuition kept circling back to Harlan. Why had he looked so scared last night? What was he hiding? I was about to find out something that would turn my world upside down. Something about my husband that I never saw coming. And it all started with a secret he'd been keeping for 10 years. Want to know what it was? You're not gonna believe this next part. Someone tried to take me out at that gala, and I was done playing nice. I'm Liora Voss, and my intuition was screaming that my husband, Harlan Cade, and my half-sister Rowan were hiding something big. What I uncovered about Harlan's past shook me to my core, and it's only the beginning. Keep watching, because this secret could ruin everything. After waking up in our Midtown penthouse, my head still foggy from that spiked champagne at the Cade Pharmaceuticals gala. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being played. My intuition, that sharp voice in my head, was louder than ever, like a siren warning me of danger. Someone had drugged me, and the list of suspects was short. Theo, my ex, who was pushing me to betray Harlan for his startup, or Rowan, my half-sister, whose smirk at the gala still haunted me. But there was something else, Harlan's reaction. When I woke up, that flicker of fear in his eyes, like he knew more than he was letting on. "You're my wife, Liora," he'd said, his voice almost breaking. Why did that feel like a confession? I spent the next morning pacing our penthouse, the Atlanta skyline glittering outside like a taunt. My intuition kept circling back to Harlan. He was the key to this mess, but not in the way I'd thought. I'd always seen him as a cold, calculating CEO, obsessed with Cade Pharmaceuticals and its race to dominate the cancer drug market. But that night, when he carried me out of the gala, he wasn't the untouchable millionaire I'd married. He was human. My intuition whispered, "He's hiding something, but it's not what you think." I needed answers, and I wasn't going to wait for them to fall into my lap. I started digging, starting with my phone. Theo had texted me again, his message dripping with fake concern. "Liora, I heard what happened. Call me." I ignored it, my intuition screaming that he was part of this. Instead, I pulled up old emails from my family's company, Voss Biotech, looking for anything that could explain why someone would want me out of the picture. That's when I found it, a buried file from 10 years ago from a conference at Georgia Tech where I'd presented a paper on vaccine development. My name was all over it, but so was Harlan's. He'd been there, in the audience, scribbling notes. A line in the file caught my eye. Harlan Cade, rising star at Cade Pharmaceuticals, praises Liora Voss's innovative approach. My heart skipped. Had we met back then? Why didn't I remember? I confronted Harlan that evening in his office, a sleek space with mahogany walls and a view of downtown Atlanta's twinkling lights. He was hunched over his desk, papers scattered, looking more stressed than I'd ever seen. "Harlan, were you at Georgia Tech 10 years ago?" I asked, my voice sharp. He froze, his pen hovering over a contract. "Why do you ask?" he said, dodging the question. My intuition flared. "Don't lie to me," I snapped. "I found a file. You were there when I presented." He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "Yeah, I was," he admitted. "You were brilliant, Liora. I never forgot it." His words hit me like a tidal wave. Brilliant? Harlan Cade, the ice-cold CEO, thought I was brilliant? My intuition screamed, "He's been in love with you since then." I pressed him harder. "Why didn't you tell me? Why marry me through some corporate deal if you cared?" My voice cracked, betraying the confusion swirling inside me. Harlan looked away, his jaw tight. "It wasn't my choice," he said. "Your father and my board pushed the merger. I didn't want to trap you." Trap me? My mind raced. Was that why he'd been so distant? Because he thought I hated the marriage as much as he did? Before I could push further, his phone buzzed, and he glanced at it, his face darkening. "We'll talk later," he said, standing abruptly. "I have to handle something at the company." My intuition told me he was running from more than just a phone call. That night, alone in our penthouse, I couldn't stop thinking about Harlan's confession. 10 years. He'd carried a torch for me since Georgia Tech, but never said a word. Why? And why was my intuition still buzzing, warning me that the gala wasn't a one-off? I started digging deeper, hacking into Rowan's social media. She'd always been careless with passwords. Her DMs were a gold mine. Messages to Theo, cryptic but damning. "Make sure she's out of the way tonight." And "Harlan's distracted. Now's our chance." My blood ran cold. Rowan had been at the gala, smiling as I collapsed. Was she the one who spiked my drink? And what did Theo have to do with it? I called my lawyer, the one drafting my divorce papers, and told him to hold off. "I'm not sure anymore," I said, my voice shaky. My intuition was telling me to stop, to rethink everything. Harlan wasn't the enemy. Someone else was, and they were closer than I thought. The next day, I followed a hunch and checked the security logs from Cade Pharmaceuticals headquarters. Someone had accessed sensitive files about our Alzheimer's drug patent, the one Theo was obsessed with. The timestamp? Hours after the gala. My intuition screamed, "This is bigger than you." I met Theo at a coffee shop in Midtown, pretending I was still on his side. "I'm in," I lied, sipping an espresso while watching his every move. "But I need to know you're serious about the startup." Theo leaned in, his smile too perfect. "With that patent, Liora, we'll be unstoppable," he said. "Cade Pharmaceuticals won't know what hit them." His words confirmed my suspicions. He wasn't just after me. He wanted Harlan's empire. But my intuition whispered something else. Rowan's not working alone. Someone bigger was pulling the strings. Someone inside the company. I went back to Harlan, ready to tell him everything, but he was different. Distracted, almost haunted. "Liora, there's something you need to know," he said, his voice low. We were in our living room, the Atlanta skyline glowing behind him. "It's about my family." Before he could finish, his phone rang again, and he cursed under his breath. "It's about Mrs. Liora Cade," he said, referring to his grandmother, the founder of Cade Pharmaceuticals. "She's sick. I have to go." Sick? My intuition went into overdrive. Something told me Alara's illness wasn't natural, and it was connected to the gala, to Theo, to Rowan, and maybe to Harlan's secret. I was about to uncover something that would change everything, but it would put me in more danger than I could imagine. Want to know what I found? You're not ready for this. My intuition was screaming that someone was out to destroy my husband's family, and I was right. I'm Liora Voss, and when I discovered that Mrs. Liora Cade, the heart of Cade Pharmaceuticals, was being poisoned, my whole world turned upside down. Who's behind this? You won't believe what I found next. Stay tuned, because this gets wild. Harlan's words echoed in my head as I stood in our penthouse, the Atlanta skyline glowing outside like a warning. "It's about Mrs. Liora Cade," he'd said, his voice tight with worry. "She's sick." My intuition, that relentless voice that had saved me from a spiked drink at the gala, was now screaming that this wasn't just a coincidence. Mrs. Liora Cade, Harlan's grandmother and the legendary founder of Cade Pharmaceuticals, wasn't just sick. Someone was trying to kill her. I could feel it in my bones, and I wasn't about to let it happen. Not on my watch. I drove to the Cade family estate in Druid Hills, a sprawling mansion with oak-lined driveways and a history as rich as Atlanta itself. Mrs. Liora Cade was in her late 70s, sharp as a tack despite her frail frame, with silver hair and eyes that could cut through corporate nonsense. I'd always admired her. She'd built Cade Pharmaceuticals from nothing, turning it into a powerhouse that rivaled Pfizer. But when I walked into her sunlit study, she looked pale, her hands trembling as she sipped tea. "Liora, dear," she said, her voice weak but warm. "What brings you here?" I forced a smile, hiding the panic rising in my chest. My intuition was buzzing like a live wire. "Check her meds. Mrs. Cade, how are you feeling?" I asked, sitting beside her. She waved a hand, dismissing my concern. "Just old age catching up," she said. But I wasn't buying it. I glanced at the pill bottle on her side table. Heart medication, prescribed for years. My intuition screamed, "Look closer." I excused myself to the bathroom, grabbing the bottle on the way. In the privacy of the marble-tiled room, I popped it open and examined the pills. They looked wrong. Too small. Too white. I'd worked in biotech long enough to know something was off. I slipped a few into my purse and sent a quick text to a lab contact from my Voss biotech days. Test these. Urgent. Back in the study, I watched Mrs. Cade closely. She was eating her usual breakfast, homemade granola with yogurt, a ritual she swore by. But as she scooped a spoonful, my intuition flared again. There was a faint, powdery residue on the granola, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. My heart raced. "Mrs. Cade, don't eat that," I said, sharper than I meant. She froze, her spoon midair. "What's wrong, Liora?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. I didn't have an answer yet, but I grabbed the granola jar and sealed it in a bag. "Just trust me," I said, my voice shaking. My intuition was telling me this was no accident, and it was connected to the gala. I called Harlan from the car, my hands gripping the wheel as I sped back to Buckhead. "Harlan, it's your grandmother," I said. "Her pills are wrong, and there's something in her granola." He went silent, then cursed under his breath. "Meet me at the office," he said. "Now." I could hear the fear in his voice, the same fear I'd seen when I woke up after the gala. At Cade Pharmaceuticals, headquarters, a glass tower in downtown Atlanta, Harlan was waiting in the boardroom, his face grim. "What did you find?" he demanded. I showed him the pill bottle and the granola jar, explaining my suspicions. "Someone's poisoning her," I said. "This isn't random." Harlan's eyes darkened, and for a moment, I thought he might break something. "Who would do this?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. My intuition pointed at two names, Theo and Rowan. Theo was desperate for Cade's Alzheimer's patent, and Rowan had been scheming to tear us apart. But something told me there was more. Someone bigger pulling the strings. "We need to test these," I said, handing him the samples. Harlan nodded, already calling his security team. "I'll get the lab on it," he said. "But Liora, why are you doing this? I thought you wanted out." His question hit me like a slap. He was right. I'd been planning to divorce him, to hand Theo everything. But standing there, watching Harlan fight for his grandmother, I felt a pang of guilt. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't let this happen to her. Or to you." Harlan stared at me, his expression unreadable. "You don't owe me anything," he said, but his tone was softer, almost vulnerable. My intuition whispered, "He's holding back something. Big." I wanted to push, to ask about that Georgia Tech conference 10 years ago, but my phone buzzed, a text from my lab contact. "Pills contain a banned beta blocker. Lethal in high doses. Granola has traces of cyanide. Be careful." Cyanide. The word sent a chill down my spine. Someone wasn't just trying to weaken Mrs. Cade, they wanted her dead. I showed Harlan the text, and his face went pale. "This is about the company," he said. "Someone's trying to take us down." My intuition screamed agreement, but it also pointed at him. Why was he so quick to assume it was about Cade Pharmaceuticals? What wasn't he telling me? I remembered his words from the gala night. "You're my wife." Was that all he meant? Or was there more to his secret? I decided to keep digging. I went back to the security logs I'd checked after the gala, cross-referencing them with Mrs. Cade's medical records. Someone had accessed her prescription files weeks ago, around the same time Theo started pushing me for the patent. But there was another name in the logs, Donovan Hale, a senior director at Cade Pharmaceuticals. I'd met Donovan once, a slick man in his 50s with a smile that never reached his eyes. My intuition latched onto him. Was he working with Theo? With Rowan? Or was he the mastermind? I set up another meeting with Theo, pretending I was still his ally. "I'm getting you the patent," I lied. meeting him at a rooftop bar overlooking Peachtree Street. His eyes lit up, but there was something off, a nervous twitch in his smile. "You're doing the right thing, Liora," he said too smoothly. My intuition screamed, he knows about the poisoning. I played along, but my mind was racing. If Donovan was involved, this was bigger than Theo or Rowan. Someone wanted Mrs. Cade gone, the company in chaos, and me out of the picture. But why? And what did Harlan know that he wasn't telling me? As I left the bar, my intuition whispered a warning. "You're getting too close." Someone was watching me, and the next move would put me in the crosshairs. Want to know who's behind this? It's about to get dangerous. I thought I knew betrayal when someone spiked my drink and poisoned my husband's grandmother, but nothing prepared me for the knife in my back from my own family. I'm Liora Voss, and what I uncovered about my half-sister Rowan made my blood run cold. Want to know how deep her lies go? Don't look away. This one's a game changer. The lab results were a punch to the gut. Mrs. Harlan Cade's heart pills laced with a banned toxin, her granola sprinkled with cyanide. Someone wanted her dead, and my intuition was screaming that this was no random attack. It was a calculated move against Cade Pharmaceuticals. Standing in that sterile lab in downtown Atlanta, Harlan's face was a mix of rage and fear as he read the report. "Who's doing this, Liora?" he asked, his voice low, almost breaking. I didn't have a name yet, but my intuition kept pointing to two people. Theo, my ex, who was desperate for the company's Alzheimer's patent, and Rowan, my half-sister, whose smirk at the gala still haunted me. But something told me there was a bigger player, someone like Donovan Hale, the slick director I'd flagged in the security logs. I needed to start with Rowan. She'd been too close, too eager to push me away from Harlan. Rowan Keene had always been a thorn in my side. Growing up, she was the golden child of our blended family, living off the Voss fortune while I fought. To prove myself in biotech, she'd moved into our Buckhead mansion after Dad died, spending her days at influencer parties and her nights whispering in my ear about how Harlan was a cold, heartless CEO. "You deserve better, Liora," she'd say, her blonde hair gleaming as she poured me wine on the terrace. "Theo's your real love." I'd believed her, letting her fuel my divorce plans. But after the gala and the poisoning, my intuition was screaming, "Rowan's not your ally." She was hiding something, and I was done playing nice. I started digging into her life, starting with her phone, which she'd left unlocked during one of her late-night parties. Her messages were a goldmine. Texts to Theo, vague but damning, "Keep her distracted," and "The old lady's out of the way soon." My heart raced. Was Rowan involved in the poisoning? I kept scrolling, and then I saw it. A message from 7 years ago, sent to an unknown number. "Make sure Liora thinks it was Barrett." Barrett Sloan, my adoptive brother, was someone I'd cut out of my life after a night I thought he'd crossed a line when I was 18. I'd blamed him for years, carrying that trauma like a weight. But now my intuition screamed, "Rowan set you up." I drove to the Buckhead mansion, my hands shaking on the wheel. Rowan was lounging by the pool, scrolling through her phone, oblivious to the storm coming. "Rowan?" I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. She looked up, her smile faltering. "What's wrong, sis?" she asked, all fake sweetness. I didn't waste time. 7 years ago, I said, stepping closer. "You framed Barrett, didn't you? You made me think he attacked me." Her face went pale, but she recovered fast, laughing. "You're paranoid, Liora. That's ancient history." My intuition wasn't buying it. I pulled out my phone, showing her the message. "Explain this," I demanded. Rowan's eyes widened, but she doubled down. "You're grasping at straws," she snapped. "You've always been jealous of me." That's when I lost it. "You lied to me," I shouted, my voice echoing across the pool. "You set me up to hate Barrett, to push me away from the family. so you could control the Voss fortune." She stood, her face twisting. "You think you're so smart?" she hissed. "But you're in over your head, Liora. You and Harlan are done." I stepped closer, my voice low. "Get out of my house, now." She laughed, but I was already calling security. "Cut her access," I told them. "No more cards, no more mansion." Rowan's jaw dropped. "You'll regret this," she spat, storming off. My intuition whispered, "She's not done yet." With Rowan out, I felt a weight lift, but the puzzle was far from solved. My intuition kept circling back to Theo. He'd been pushing for the Alzheimer's patent, and his texts with Rowan hinted at a bigger plan. I set up another meeting with him, this time at a quiet diner off Peachtree Street. "I'm close to getting you the patent," I lied, watching his reaction. Theo leaned in, his hazel eyes gleaming. "You're doing the right thing, Liora," he said. "Cade Pharmaceuticals is a sinking ship." His confidence was too much, too polished. My intuition screamed, "He's working with someone." Was it Donovan Hale? The security logs had shown Donovan accessing sensitive files, but I needed more proof. I went to Harlan, finding him in his office at Cade Pharmaceuticals, surrounded by papers and a half-empty coffee cup. "Harlan, we need to talk about Rowan," I said, laying out everything, her messages, the frame-up with Barrett, her push to get me to leave him. He listened, his face unreadable, but his hands clenched into fists. "And Theo?" he asked. "He's part of it," I said. "But I think there's someone else. Donovan Hale." Harlan's eyes narrowed. "Donovan's been with the company for years," he said, but I could hear the doubt in his voice. My intuition latched onto it. "Check his records," I urged. "He's hiding something." Harlan agreed to pull Donovan's files, but as we left the office, he grabbed my arm, his touch gentle but firm. "Liora, why are you fighting for this?" he asked, his voice raw. "For me? For the company?" I didn't know how to answer. My plan to divorce him felt like a lifetime ago, replaced by a need to protect him, Mrs. Cade, and everything they'd built. "Because it's right," I said, my voice shaking. He looked at me, his eyes searching mine, and for a moment I thought he'd say something. Something about that secret he'd been hiding since Georgia Tech. But his phone buzzed and he stepped back. "We'll talk soon," he said, leaving. Me alone in the hallway. My intuition was relentless now, screaming that the pieces were coming together. Rowan's betrayal was just the tip of the iceberg. Theo was a pawn, but Donovan? He was the key. I hacked into the company's server late. That night, my fingers flying over my laptop in the penthouse. What I found sent chills down my spine. Emails from Donovan to an unknown account, mentioning the old lady and clearing the way for the takeover. Takeover? My heart stopped. This wasn't just about poisoning Mrs. Cade. It was about stealing Cade Pharmaceuticals. But there was one name in those emails that made my blood run cold, a name I never expected. Who was it? "You're not going to believe what's coming next." I thought I could trust my ex, but his betrayal cut deeper than I ever imagined. I'm Liora Voss, and when I set a trap for Theo, I uncovered a web of lies that threatened to destroy everything: my marriage, Cade Pharmaceuticals, and even my life. Want to know what he's really after? Don't blink, because this is about to get intense. The emails I found on Donovan Hale's server were like a bomb going off in my head. References to clearing the way for the takeover and the old lady sent chills down my spine. But it was the name in one of those emails that stopped me cold. Theo Langford. My ex, the guy I'd almost thrown away my marriage for, was tangled up with Donovan, a senior director at Cade Pharmaceuticals. My intuition, that relentless voice that had saved me from a spiked drink and poisoned granola, was screaming now. Theo's not just after the patent. He's part of something bigger, I had to confront him, but I wasn't going to walk in blind. If Theo thought he could play me, he was about to learn I wasn't the naive girl from Savannah anymore. I set up a meeting at the Fox Theater, one of Atlanta's glitziest venues, where Cade Pharmaceuticals was hosting a high-profile fundraiser. The place was dripping with glamour, red velvet curtains, gold accents, and the who's who of the city's elite sipping cocktails under chandeliers. I wore a crimson dress that turned heads, but my focus was on Theo. He was waiting in a private box overlooking the stage, his tailored suit and easy smile as disarming as ever. "Liora, you look stunning," he said, his hazel eyes locking onto mine. My intuition screamed, "He's playing you." I forced a smile, playing the part of the lovesick ex. "I'm ready to hand over the Alzheimer's patent," I lied, leaning in close. "But I need to know you're all in." Theo's face lit up, but there was a flicker of something else. Greed, maybe, or nervousness. "You're making the right call," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "With that patent, my startup will bury Cade Pharmaceuticals. You and me, Liora, will run this town." His words were too polished, too rehearsed. My intuition was buzzing like a live wire. I pushed further. "What's your plan, Theo? How do you know it'll work?" He leaned back, sipping his drink, but I caught the twitch in his jaw. "I've got investors," he said. "Big players. They trust me to deliver." Investors? My mind flashed to Donovan. Was he one of Theo's players? I kept him talking, steering the conversation to the patent. "It's locked in Harlan's private server," I said, dangling the bait. "I can get it, but I need details. Who's backing you?" Theo hesitated, his smile faltering. "You don't need to worry about that," he said, but my intuition wasn't buying it. I pressed harder. If I'm risking everything, I deserve to know. That's when he slipped. "Donovan's got it handled," he said, then froze, realizing his mistake. My heart pounded. Donovan Hale. Theo tried to backtrack, laughing it off. "Just a business contact, Liora. No big deal." But I was done playing games. "You're working with him, aren't you?" I snapped, my voice low. "You and Donovan are trying to take down Harlan." Theo's charm vanished, replaced by a cold glare. "You're in too deep, Liora," he said, standing. "Walk away or you'll regret it." He stormed out, leaving me in the box, my hands shaking. My intuition had been right. Theo wasn't just after the patent. He was part of a plot to destroy Cade Pharmaceuticals. But Donovan's name in his mouth confirmed it. They were working together, and Mrs. Liora Cade's poisoning was just the start. I needed to tell Harlan, but I had to be smart. Theo's threat wasn't empty, and Donovan was a bigger player than I'd realized. I drove to Cade Pharmaceuticals' headquarters, the Atlanta skyline glowing under a stormy sky. Harlan was in the boardroom, surrounded by charts and coffee. Cups, looking like he hadn't slept in days. "Liora, what's wrong?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. I took a deep breath and laid it all out. The confrontation with Theo, his slip about Donovan, the takeover plot. Harlan's face darkened, his fists clenching. "Donovan's been with us for years," he said, but I could hear the doubt creeping in. "He's ambitious, but this?" I handed him my phone, showing the emails I'd hacked. "He's planning to take the company," I said. "And Theo's his pawn." Harlan stared at the screen, his jaw tight. "If this is true, we're in trouble," he said. "The Alzheimer's patent is our biggest asset. If they get it—" He trailed off, but I knew what he meant. Cade Pharmaceuticals would collapse, and Harlan's legacy, Mrs. Cade's legacy, would be gone. I touched his arm, my voice steady. "We'll stop them," I said. "Together." For the first time, Harlan looked at me not as his arranged wife, but as a partner. "Why are you doing this, Liora?" he asked, his voice raw. "After everything, why fight for me?" My intuition whispered, "Because he's worth it." But I didn't say it. Instead, I met his gaze. Because it's right. We started planning. Harlan pulled security footage from the company servers, looking for proof of Donovan's moves. I reached out to a tech contact from my Voss biotech days, asking them to trace the unknown email account linked to Donovan. The results came back faster than I expected. The account was tied to a shell company in Delaware, one that had been funneling money to Theo's startup. My intuition screamed, "This is the proof you need." But there was something else in the data, a reference to an incident years ago that made my blood run cold. It mentioned Harlan's parents, killed in a car accident I'd always thought was random. Was Donovan involved in that too? I confronted Harlan that night in our penthouse, the city lights casting shadows across the room. "Harlan, what happened to your parents?" I asked, my voice trembling. He froze, his face paling. "Why are you asking this now?" he said, his tone guarded. My intuition was relentless. "Because I think Donovan had something to do with it," I said. Harlan's eyes widened, and for a moment I saw raw pain. "That's impossible," he whispered, but I could tell he wasn't sure. My intuition screamed, "You're close to the truth." But as we stood there, my phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. "Stop digging, or you're next." My heart stopped. Someone knew I was onto them, and they weren't playing games anymore. What did I just uncover? "You're not gonna believe who's behind this." A chilling message told me to stop digging, but I was too close to the truth to back down. "I'm Liora Voss, and what I uncovered about Donovan Hale, the man pulling the strings at Cade Pharmaceuticals, nearly cost me everything." "Who's the mastermind behind the poisonings and betrayals?" Hold on tight. This reveal will shock you to your core. That anonymous text, "Stop digging or you're next," sent a shiver down my spine as I sat in our penthouse, the Atlanta skyline glowing. Like a warning outside, my intuition, the voice that had guided me through spiked drinks, poisoned granola, and Rowan's betrayal, was screaming louder than ever. Donovan Hale, the slick senior director at Cade Pharmaceuticals, was the key. His emails about a takeover, and Theo's slip at the Fox Theater confirmed it. Donovan wasn't just involved, he was the mastermind. And that hint about Harlan's parents' car accident. My intuition told me it wasn't an accident at all. I was done playing defense. It was time to take Donovan down. I showed Harlan the threatening message, my hands trembling as we sat in our living room, the city lights casting long shadows. "Donovan's behind this," I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at me. "He's targeting Mrs. Liora Cade, the company, maybe even us." Harlan's face hardened, his eyes burning with a mix of anger and pain. "If he's responsible for my parents?" He trailed off, his fists clenching. I'd never seen him like this, raw, vulnerable, like the weight of a decade-old loss was crashing down. My intuition whispered, "He's been carrying this alone." I touched his arm. "We'll get him," I said. "Together." We needed a plan, and fast. Donovan was too smart to leave loose ends, and that text meant he knew I was onto him. I suggested a trap, something to force him to show his hand. Harlan hesitated, his eyes searching mine. "Liora, this is dangerous," he said. "If he's capable of poisoning my grandmother, he won't hesitate to hurt you." My heart skipped. Was this the Harlan I'd written off as cold? The man who'd loved me since Georgia Tech, hiding it behind a CEO's mask? I pushed the thought aside. "I'm not backing down," I said. "Mrs. Cade deserves justice. So do your parents." We decided to use Mrs. Liora Cade's death as bait. She was still in the ICU, recovering from the poisoned pills and granola, but stable enough to play along. Harlan spread a rumor through the company that she'd passed away, scheduling an emergency board meeting to discuss the future of Cade Pharmaceuticals. I knew Donovan wouldn't resist the chance to seize control. My intuition was buzzing. He'll make a move. I worked with Harlan's security team to plant hidden cameras in the boardroom, a sleek space in the company's downtown Atlanta tower, with glass walls and a view of the city's heartbeat. The meeting day arrived, and I stood beside Harlan, dressed in a sharp blazer, my nerves on edge. Donovan walked in, his tailored suit and smug smile hiding the predator beneath. "Terrible news about Mrs. Cade," he said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. The board members nodded, unaware of our plan. Harlan took the lead, his voice steady. "With my grandmother gone, we need to secure the Alzheimer's patent," he said. "Any threats to the company must be addressed." Donovan's eyes gleamed, and my intuition screamed, "He's taking the bait." As the meeting dragged on, Donovan made his pitch. "I propose a new direction," he said, standing. "A merger with a third-party investor to protect our assets." I leaned forward, my heart racing. Third-party investor? That had to be the shell company tied to Theo's startup. I glanced at Harlan, who gave me a subtle nod. "Who's the investor, Donovan?" I asked, my voice calm but sharp. He faltered just for a second. "A private group," he said. "They're ready to move fast." My intuition screamed, "He's lying." That's when we dropped the bomb. Harlan stood, his voice like steel. "Mrs. Cade isn't dead," he said. The room gasped. Donovan's face went white. "She's alive. And we know about the poison," Harlan continued. "The pills, the granola. Your work, Donovan." I pulled out my phone, playing the hacked emails for the board, including one where Donovan bragged about clearing the way for the takeover. The room erupted in murmurs, but Donovan laughed, a cold, desperate sound. "You have nothing," he sneered. "Just speculation." I was ready. "Not quite," I said, signaling security. The cameras had caught everything, Donovan's every word, his smug confidence. But I had one more card to play. "You also arranged the car accident that killed Harlan's parents," I said, my voice shaking with rage. I held up a printout from the server, a memo from 10 years ago linking Donovan to a mechanic who tampered with their brakes. Harlan's face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought he'd lunge at Donovan. "You monster," he whispered. Donovan bolted for the door, but security was faster, pinning him against the glass wall. "You'll never prove it," he shouted, struggling. But the evidence was airtight. Emails, server logs, the lab results from the poison. As security dragged him away, he turned to me, his eyes burning. "You think this is over, Liora?" he hissed. "You have no idea who you're up against." My intuition flared. There's someone else. The boardroom fell silent, but the threat hung in the air. Harlan grabbed my hand, his grip tight. "You did it," he said, his voice raw. "You saved her." I wanted to believe it was over, but my intuition wasn't done. Donovan was the mastermind, but his words, "You have no idea who you're up against," echoed in my head. Who else was out there? And what did Harlan know that he still wasn't telling me? As we left the boardroom, the Atlanta skyline looming, outside I felt a chill. The fight wasn't over, and the next truth would hit closer to home than I ever expected. Want to know what's coming? You're not prepared for this. I took down the mastermind behind a deadly plot, but his final words haunted me. "You have no idea who you're up against. I'm Liora Voss, and after saving my husband's family and his company, I thought it was over. But what I discovered about Harlan's heart changed everything." Want to know the secret that redefined my life? This is the moment you've been waiting for. Donovan Hale's arrest in the Cade Pharmaceuticals boardroom felt like a victory, but his parting words, "You have no idea who you're up against," clung to me like a shadow. Standing in that glass-walled room with Atlanta's skyline, stretching beyond, I gripped Harlan's hand, his warmth grounding me. My intuition, the voice that had guided me through spiked drinks, poisoned granola, and Rowan's betrayal, was quieter now. but it still whispered, "There's more to uncover." Donovan was gone, handcuffed and ranting as security dragged him away. But the threat in his voice hinted at a larger game. Was there someone else out there, waiting to strike? I pushed the thought aside. For now, I'd saved Mrs. Liora Cade and protected Cade Pharmaceuticals. That had to be enough. Harlan and I left the boardroom, the weight of the confrontation still heavy. In the elevator, he turned to me, his dark eyes softer than I'd ever seen. "Liora, you didn't have to do this," he said, his voice raw. "You could have walked away." My heart ached. Just weeks ago, I'd been ready to divorce him, to hand Theo everything for a $1 billion payout. Now, standing beside Harlan, I felt like a different woman. "I couldn't let them destroy you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Or Mrs. Cade. Or the company." He looked at me, his gaze intense, like he was seeing me for the first time. My intuition whispered, "He's about to tell you everything." We drove to Emory Hospital, where Mrs. Liora Cade was recovering. The ICU was quiet, the beep of monitors a stark contrast to the chaos we'd just left. Mrs. Cade sat up in her bed, her silver hair loose, her eyes sharp despite the ordeal. "Liora, Harlan," she said, her voice strong. "You saved me." I smiled, squeezing her hand. "We had to," I said. She looked at Harlan, then back at me. "You're more than I ever hoped for my grandson," she said. My throat tightened. Mrs. Cade had built Cade Pharmaceuticals from nothing, and her approval felt like a crown I didn't know I'd earned. Back at our penthouse that night, Harlan poured 2 glasses of bourbon, the Atlanta skyline glittering outside. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice low. My intuition flared, sensing the weight of what was coming. 10 years ago at Georgia Tech, I saw you present that vaccine paper," he said. "You were fearless, brilliant. I fell in love with you that day, Liora." My breath caught. "But I never said anything," he continued. "When our families pushed the merger, I thought it was my chance to be close to you, even if you didn't feel the same." His eyes met mine, raw and unguarded. "I've loved you every day since." The words hit me like a tidal wave. The devastating secret I'd been chasing wasn't just Donovan's plot or the poisoning. It was Harlan's heart, hidden behind his cold CEO facade. I'd almost thrown it all away for Theo, for Rowan's lies, for a life I thought I wanted. Tears stung my eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice breaking. He stepped closer, his hand brushing my cheek. "I didn't want to trap you," he said, "but I couldn't let you go." In that moment, my intuition was silent. No warnings, no doubts, just us. We spent the next week rebuilding. With Donovan gone, Harlan and I took charge of Cade Pharmaceuticals, cleaning house. Theo's startup collapsed without funding, and last I heard, he'd left Atlanta, tail between his legs. Rowan was cut off, her influencer life crumbling without the Voss fortune. I reached out to Barrett Sloan, my adoptive brother, apologizing for the years I'd blamed him for Rowan's lies. He forgave me, and we started mending what was broken. Mrs. Cade, now out of the hospital, returned to the board, her presence a reminder of the legacy we were fighting for. But Donovan's threat lingered. My intuition kept nudging me, whispering that someone else might be out there, watching. I hired a private investigator to trace the shell company tied to Donovan's emails, just to be safe. For now, though, I focused on what mattered. Harlan and I planned a private ceremony at the Atlanta Botanical Garden, a quiet oasis amidst the city's hustle. Under an arch of roses, with the skyline in the distance, we renewed our vows. "I love you, Liora," Harlan said, his voice steady, his eyes locked on mine. "Always have, always will." I smiled, tears falling. "I love you too," I said, meaning every word. The weight of the past, Theo, Rowan, Donovan, melted away. Today, I stand beside Harlan, co-leading Cade, pharmaceuticals into a new era. We're pushing for ethical drug development, ensuring no one else suffers like Mrs. Cade did. Atlanta is our stage, its energy fueling our mission. My intuition, once a frantic warning, is now a quiet guide, reminding me I'm where I belong. But late at night, when the city's quiet, I can't shake Donovan's words. Is there another enemy out there, waiting for their moment? I don't know yet, but one thing's certain. I'm not the Liora who walked into that gala, naive and ready to run. I'm stronger now, and if someone comes for us, they'll find out who's really in charge. Want to know what's next? Stick around. This story's far from over.